All right, let's jump right into this explainer and unpack a massive paradigm shift happening right under our noses: the new science and psychology of staying single. For the longest time, society has treated being single as this, well, kind of awkward waiting room, right? A transitional phase you're just supposed to sit in until you finally find a partner. But the hard data and recent cultural analyses are showing us something completely different. We're literally looking at a profound transformation in how people, especially self-sufficient folks, are building their lives and finding real fulfillment. So why exactly are more people choosing to stay single than ever before? It's a great question, because it totally challenges that age-old assumption that being single is just this lonely waiting period before you find the one. And it turns out it's not just bad luck, and it's definitely not always a fear of commitment. Across modern dating, we're seeing people actively question these deeply held beliefs. They're reevaluating what they actually need and honestly reconsidering what is genuinely worth their time and emotional energy. What we're witnessing is a massive cultural transition. People are no longer willing to confuse struggle and self-erasure with true love. I mean, for generations we were basically taught that love is constant work, that loyalty means staying no matter what, and that suffering is just part of the deal. But today, people aren't giving up on love. Actually, it's the opposite. They've decided they want healthy, balanced love that's actually based on emotional maturity. If that's available, great. If not, well, they're choosing the peace of being alone.
Okay, moving on to Section 1, the myth of the single.
To understand why people are staying single today, we've got to look backward at the old model of survival and endurance. For most of human history, relationships were literally built on survival, economic dependence, and super strict social roles. Get this, in the United States, women legally could not open their own bank accounts or apply for loans without a male co-signer until the 1970s. That's not ancient history. Love was often just a bonus. But fast forward to the modern standard of alignment and mutual respect. For the first time ever, massive numbers of people can build completely full, self-sustaining lives on their own. When a romantic relationship becomes an elective addition rather than a survival necessity, it completely changes the cost of entry. A huge part of this shift is the rejection of over-functioning. This is that exhausting dynamic where one partner disproportionately carries the emotional weight, initiates all the hard conversations, regulates both partners' emotions, and is always the first to compromise. It's a straight shot to relationship burnout. People are realizing that a relationship can only meet you at the level both individuals are willing to show up. When you're the only one keeping the ship afloat, you eventually hit a wall. People are just tired of abandoning themselves to keep a misaligned relationship going. The amazing Bell Hooks hit the nail on the head when she said, "Love cannot exist in any relationship that is based on domination." It's so true. True connection requires emotional equality and safety. When one person is constantly over-functioning just to compensate for a partner's lack of effort, that isn't a partnership. It's a dynamic of dominance and submission. And walking away from that, that's not a failure at all. It's an act of self-respect.
All right, let's dive into Section 2, the psychology of solitude.
Psychologically speaking, staying single is very often a highly intentional choice. There are 5 key drivers here. First, valuing independence and freedom. Some people are just wired to not rely on relationships to feel complete. Second, maintaining higher standards to avoid misalignment. Third, practicing pattern recognition. Once you've lived through emotional inconsistency, your brain adapts to protect your energy. Fourth, finding deep emotional fulfillment elsewhere, like in a career or friendships. And finally, and this is a big one, building a high tolerance for solitude so they simply do not fear being alone. When you aren't afraid to be by yourself, you completely stop settling for the wrong people.
That high tolerance for solitude is powered by self-sufficiency. Being able to manage your own emotional, financial, and physical needs means you're seeking a partner for mutual respect and shared goals, not dependency or some kind of salvation. Self-sufficient people value integrity over extravagant promises. And because their self-worth is completely independent of a partner's approval, they have the boundary-setting capacity to just walk away from neurotic or emotionally demanding love. It's a real game changer.
To really ground these concepts, let's look at some hard data. We're turning to a rigorous academic study by Schachner, Shaver, and Gillath. They tracked a community sample of both single and coupled adults to examine their attachment styles, emotional well-being, and even childhood histories, to figure out what's really happening beneath the surface of long-term singlehood. And what do they find? The data completely debunks the myth that single people are inherently broken or avoidant. It turns out, singles are just as likely as coupled individuals to exhibit attachment security. The researchers found no significant difference in insecure attachment between the single and coupled groups. Society loves to stereotype singles as being afraid of commitment or emotionally unavailable. but the science literally tells us they are just as capable of secure, healthy attachment as anyone else.
Let's move on to Section 3, High Standards and Ambition.
Now, looking at the cultural side of things, critiques suggest modern women are maintaining high standards and refusing mediocrity. They're actively choosing singlehood over traditional dating norms that can, frankly, reward emotional laziness. Historically, patriarchal structures have shielded men from emotional consequences, which can hamper emotional intelligence. So today, many highly skilled, confident modern women are taking a look at the dating pool, deciding exactly how much mediocrity they're willing to tolerate, and deciding that the answer is 0.
We can also see this in John Owen's study regarding ambition. High academic and career aspirations heavily influence partner selection, often delaying serious commitments so people can focus on personal achievements. Interestingly, women are more likely to prioritize educational attainment in partner choices, while men are more likely to focus on career progression. The takeaway here? People with lofty goals want partners who truly respect their ambitions, and they are more than willing to hold off on relationship milestones to get that alignment.
Which brings us to Section 4, redefining the support system.
So, if romantic partners aren't the absolute center of the universe, how do singles meet their emotional needs? Because humans are undeniably social creatures, right? Well, the Schachter study used something called the WSOTO scale. This is a psychological tool that measures how people fulfill core attachment functions. Basically, it asks, who do you seek out for comfort as a safe haven in times of stress, and who acts as your secure base so you feel safe exploring the world? The chart here is super revealing. It shows that singles just configure their support systems differently. They often utilize sisters as a secure base, best friends for proximity maintenance, and parents for support. While coupled people overwhelmingly dump all these needs onto their romantic partners, single folks successfully distribute these essential attachment functions across a much broader network. They have just as much support, it just looks a bit different. All right, Section 5, the reality of singlehood. Because while singlehood is incredibly empowering, we've got to look at the full, nuanced picture. The academic data shows it's not without genuine challenges. Long-term singles actually reported higher levels of depression, general anxiety, and loneliness compared to coupled participants. We have to acknowledge this complex reality. Choosing not to settle can still leave you wrestling with significant emotional and societal pressures. Living outside the coupled norm in a society that is literally built for pairs can absolutely take a measurable emotional toll.
But, and this is a really crucial distinction, the researchers note that negative affect measures like anxiety and loneliness refer to current states, whereas attachment dimensions are longer lasting. This means that while the loneliness is a very real current state for many singles, it doesn't necessarily stem from a permanent personality defect or an insecure attachment flaw. You can be a completely secure, totally self-sufficient person and still feel the sting of loneliness on a Friday night. It's a temporary state, not a permanent trait.
To sum up the complex realities of the single experience, the study found a few interesting trade-offs. Long-term singles reported higher rates of casual sex, but lower overall sexual satisfaction. There were also retrospective reports of troubled childhoods, particularly parental neglect or indifference. But on the flip side, they found profound relief from the emotional toll of mismatched relationships. Basically, they are trading the potential fulfillment of an ideal romantic partnership to ensure they avoid the devastating emotional exhaustion of a bad one.
And because the dating landscape can be so frustrating, modern singles are actively creating alternative visions for their lives. They are finding physical and emotional fulfillment through deep community relationships and building a highly self-directed life. We're even seeing radical new concepts taking off, like co-parenting with best friends. People are no longer tying their joy strictly to finding a romantic partner. They're designing community structures that provide the fulfillment traditionally expected only from marriage. So, what's the ultimate takeaway here? Being single is no longer seen as a lack of love. It is an intentional choice to prioritize peace, self-respect, and alignment over endurance. People are waking up to the fact that being alone is definitely not the worst-case scenario. Losing yourself in the wrong relationship is. A healthy relationship should add to your life, not completely deplete it.
I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought as you navigate your own journey of alignment and connection. If romantic relationships are no longer legally or economically required for your survival, what does your picture of ultimate fulfillment look like? Think about it. When you take the pressure off finding the one just to survive, you get to design exactly what makes your life beautiful. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.